誰もいないようだが。これは
どうしたんだ。
Listen to me. I know this hurts, baby. You're gonna be okay, baby. Stay with me. I'm gonna pick you up. I know, baby. I know it hurts. Come on, baby. Please. I know, baby. I know. Sarah. Halloween! A time for spooks and scares, costume parties, horror movies, and of course, horror games. I said in my previous horror video that I believe video games are uniquely suited for the horror genre, but I didn't really spend much time talking about them. The reason for that is this very video. There was just too much that I wanted to talk about and didn't want to overwhelm myself with an overly long project for my first video. So here we are, once again talking about my favorite genre, and with a heavier focus on my preferred medium of entertainment. Its history may not be quite as storied as the nearly 300-year history of horror literature or even the 100+ years of film, but as technology's evolved over the years, so too have the games. And since horror in games, much like in movies, is about as old as the medium itself, it's grown and evolved just as much as the systems it's played on. Games like Haunted House and Nostromo in the early 80s paved the way for the genre moving forward, laying the groundwork for games like Sweet Home. Fun fact that I'm sure most of you probably know by now, but the first Resident Evil game actually began development as a Sweet Home remake. It's funny to think that remakes and remasters were being made as early as the 90s. And, well, the rest is history. Thanks to these games, the genre of horror in video games is thriving in the modern era. Resident Evil is still going strong. Silent Hill is making a comeback thanks to the incredible remake of its second entry, and the indie horror scene is absolutely booming. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how the experiences these games offer differ from that of other entertainment mediums, and what elements of these games contribute to said experiences. There are two main forms of these experiences that these games take, those being walking sims and survival horror. Of course, there are smaller subgenres within these two categories, as well as some overlap, and some games go into their own categories entirely, but those are the two most broad and popular ones, and what we'll be discussing here. A couple disclaimers before we continue. First off, I'll be retreading some ground from my horror and media video, albeit in greater detail than before. Second, I will not be censoring any depictions of blood or violence. I will be censoring some of the more risque content. Always remember to install the censor mod for Fear and Hunger before recording, kids. But the gore of these games will be more or less unchanged. If you're sensitive to that kind of content, you've been warned. And finally, I will be talking about the following games. I'm indicating on screen what type of content we'll be discussing as well, since I'll be talking about some more than others, and we'll be mostly looking at their gameplay and systems, but regardless, the warning is here. Alright, with all that out of the way, go grab some snackies and some drinkies.
Maybe get nice and cozy with a blanket.
And relax as we dive into the world of horror and video games, and talk about what makes them the peak of the genre in media. I've said it once, I've said it twice, I'll say it as many times as I need to. Video games are uniquely suited for the horror genre for the pure and simple fact that they're interactive. Think of it this way, you're watching a scary movie or reading a book. More often than not, you fear for the characters rather than yourself. But the more immersed you are, the more that begins to change. You begin to think about how you would react in the situation, if it was you experiencing the horrors the characters are. Me? But it's a different story when experiencing a video game. You are the character experiencing the horrors, to an extent. Most video games, by design, are meant to be immersive. That goes double for horror games. I mean, if the game fails to immerse you in its world and systems, it's gonna struggle to scare you. But once you are immersed, the line between you and the character you're controlling begins to blur. You begin to perceive threats in game as threats to yourself, and the scares become all the more effective. To those of you who think I'm reading too far into the experience of a good horror game, you are doing yourself a disservice by not experiencing them like this. Far be it from me to say that there's a right or wrong way to experience media, but the next time you're playing a horror game, truly do your best to immerse yourself. Turn off the lights, remove all distractions, and try to picture yourself not in a chair or couch or whatever, but on the other side of the screen and in the shoes of the character you're playing as. Or don't. I'm not your dad. Yet. Huh? But doing this will elevate your experience to grander heights. Of course, you can do this in other mediums as well, but games have the unique quality of being interactive that not only makes immersion easier, but offers a deeper level that other mediums just can't achieve. The first broad category that I'd like to talk about is that of walking sim horror games. These are typically feature-like games whose main goals are some form of go from point A to point B. Collect these 8 pages while avoiding the tall man. Find these generators so you can turn on the power. Open this door, and then this door, and then this door, and then... Wait, didn't I already open this door? Haven't I been here before? Where am I? Who are you? What the fuck is going on? As you can see, these games are very simple, mechanically speaking. And I don't mean that in a bad way either. Some of the best horror games fall into this category. Games like the previously talked about PT and its derivatives, all the classic RPG Maker horror games like Eve, Madfather, and Aloni, and who could forget Amnesia and all the other games made by the horror masters at Frictional Games. These games are so highly regarded because instead of focusing on robust systems and mechanics, they put emphasis on atmosphere and story. Take Amnesia for example. Its most complex system is probably its physics engine, and the most complex its puzzles get is this bit early on when a wall says it can't be destroyed by hand. Most of its puzzles are more akin to fetch quests, almost like they're just an extension of the game's walking sim subgenre. But these systems aren't what has its fans frothing at the mouth. No, it's because of the game's amazing atmosphere, as well as, what was at the time, its unique sanity mechanic. The game's setting of Castle Brennenburg is extremely oppressive with its creepy ambiance and dark corridors. You always feel like something is watching you in the darkness, following your every step. And the game's simple, yet massively effective sanity system engages you with the world by being almost a reflection of your experiences within the game. As you experience weird shit, Daniel's sanity drains, and you, the player, get more scared. But as you solve problems and puzzles, his sanity recovers, and you, the player, find an opportunity to relax a bit. It's through this feedback loop that the player becomes immersed with the world and characters. And it's through that immersion that the atmosphere and tension truly begin to affect the player. Another stellar game in this category is Iron Lung. This game was developed by a single person, that being David Szymanski, the madman behind Dusk and who would go on to make games like Squirrel Stapler. I mean, it's rated overwhelmingly positive on Steam, I don't know what else to say. Back to the topic of Iron Lung, it's about as simple as it gets. You're in a tiny enclosed space and control the character with 5 buttons. WASD to move, and left mouse click to interact with stuff. The vessel you're trapped in has about 5 buttons as well. 2 buttons that act as a throttle to push you forward and back, 2 buttons to change the angle of the vessel, and a final button that takes a picture of whatever's in front of the ship so that you can see what's going on ahead. Your objective is to operate the vessel while more or less blind, and navigate to points of interest on a map so that you can survey the area. This gameplay loop is extremely repetitive and dull, but with a pretty short runtime. So why do so many people love it? Well, there's 2 reasons: atmosphere and world building. Just like in Amnesia, the fantastic sound design and wonderfully timed scares bring the literal blood ocean to life. Like I said, you are blind within the steel cage. But from time to time, you can hear noises outside, like something is stalking your submarine. These noises range from movement and groans to full-on collisions. There are times when the creature will reveal itself, only to quickly disappear before you can get another image. This creeping anxiety is punctuated with the context of the world that you're in. Iron Lung is set in a very interesting world. So interesting, in fact, that Markiplier is actually making a movie based on the game. In this world, interstellar travel and mass planetary colonization has already been achieved. But one day, the majority of celestial bodies in the universe just went poof, inexplicably vanished without a trace. No one alive witnessed the event that came to be known as the Quiet Rapture. The only things that could be found in this dying world are a few space stations that were spared from the Rapture, and strange moons whose craters are filled with oceans of human blood. The exceedingly few people left alive wanted to explore and survey these craters, but didn't want to risk lives in the process, so they came up with a solution. They created a very, let's just say, forgiving judicial system. Forgiving being in extra large, bold quotations. See, you don't want to execute prisoners when the human race is inching closer and closer to extinction, but you don't want to throw them in a cell either, where you need to spend resources feeding people who are being unproductive. So what they did was force criminals into community service, doing the worst jobs that no one else wants to do.
How was your day?
How was my day?
Yeah, how was your day?
Fantastic.
Did you get your reserve goals?
I didn't get reserved shit.
Did you get your sub goals?
I got no goals. You know why? Because there's 10-year-olds running around the still going, oh my god, this is the best game ever. Mommy, can I have this? No, I want this one, no.
And that's where you come in. You're a criminal who's been tasked with guiding the submersible vessel SM-13, nicknamed the Iron Lung, through a blood ocean on the moon known as AT-5 and survey the ocean floor. The game takes the Dark Souls approach to storytelling, where it gives you the bare minimum to get you going, but then offers you a codex in the form of a terminal in the back of the ship where you can learn more about the world. With the context learned through the terminal, you're left asking very important questions. What is the Quiet Rapture? What are these moons? And most importantly for the player, what is the fish creature that hunts you throughout the game? These questions contribute to a growing anxiety that's rooted in what I believe to be the most powerful fear there is. Fear of the unknown. God, Cosmic Horror truly is the best. But do you see how much can be done with such simple games? This is why the indie horror scene is so popular, and rightfully so. That and, well, because the devs are free from the constraints of publisher demands so they don't need to compromise their artistic vision. And that artistic freedom has given birth to so many indie horror games that are just as great as Iron Lung, many of which even outperform mainstream AAA games. It's almost as if gamers want inspired creative products rather than generic trash. And I'm fully aware that I'm saying that while featuring mainly mainstream horror titles in this video, but there is a conversation to be had about indie versus AAA. That conversation, however, is one for a totally different video. But hey, if you want to see me talk about indie games, let me know in the comments down below. The goal of a survival horror game is exactly what it says on the tin. Generally speaking, walking sims are on-rail experiences where you're at the mercy of the scripted scares, and you don't typically have any means of defending yourself from those doing the scaring. In survival horror, your goal is to, well, survive. And most games in the genre offer a variety of ways to achieve this goal. Depending on the, sub-genre that the game is in, there's a multitude of playstyles that can be available to you. You can, or may need to, play the game stealthily and take out enemies one by one, or you could just say fuck it and go loud and proud. Maybe you could craft tools to help you achieve your goals more efficiently, or open up whole new ways to play. Or maybe you don't want to bother with all that and just decide to go in raw. Personally, I don't usually utilize crafting unless it's absolutely necessary, like in The Last of Us or Days Gone. Like, I think the only time I've ever crafted anything in Elden Ring was when you have to make the big pot to wake up the Wicker Man that's sleeping at the entrance of those ruins in the DLC, and I am now getting very off topic. As I mentioned in the previous horror video, the main way that this subgenre achieves its scares is through the use of inventory management systems. You see, usually in these games you have a finite number of resources that you have to work with to complete the tasks given to you in-game. Be it limited ammo, health items, crafting components, even saving can be limited in these games. If you aren't efficient enough with these resources, well, let's just say you're gonna have a bad time. There's a number of ways games can tackle this scarcity. The old Resident Evil games had set locations for resources, but you had such limited inventory space that you had to pick and choose what to take with you and what to leave behind. Juggling between weapons, ammo, herbs, and key items for puzzles made it kinda stressful at times. And this anxiety over whether or not you made the right choices, and if you're even properly equipped for the challenges ahead, left you vulnerable to the actual scares throughout the game. Some of the more modern survival horror games, however, like to add some randomness to the resources you're supplied with. Luckily, most utilize some mechanics or systems that manipulate RNG in favor of the player so you aren't totally boned. Like Fear and Hunger, which is infamous for being cruel and unforgiving. This dreadfully, beautifully fucked game does actually have systems in place that increase the odds of finding certain items under certain conditions. If you're low on torches, the game will increase the drop rate of the item or the materials required to craft one. If you're infected, you have a higher chance of finding a green herb. If you're bleeding, you'll have an easier time finding cloth, etc, etc. But these systems only increase the chance of finding them. You're not guaranteed to. Bad RNG can kill a run almost as easy as making bad choices. So in games like that, and especially on their harder difficulties, you need to be smart and think ahead, because you'll never quite know what you'll need moving forward. Do I use this grenade on this group of enemies? Or do I save it for a scarier threat I could face? Do I use this green herb now that I'm low? Or wait and hope that I find a red herb to make it more potent? Do I use my available brain juice to upgrade this skill now? Or save it for a better, more expensive skill? Wish I could show you an example of that last one, but this is what would happen every time I tried to launch the Evil Within. Fun times. Point is, these are the type of questions you need to ask yourself if you want to survive. And like I said before, it's all these questions of, did I make the right decisions? Am I prepared for the challenges ahead? That fill you with anxiety throughout your playthroughs of these games, which is then what leaves you vulnerable to the actual scares. Like this moment in The Last of Us, where I had extremely little ammo after dumping it all into infected in the previous area, and then had to go against human enemies. I was so focused on the guys with guns in front of me and my non-existent ammo count that I didn't even realize this guy had flanked around me until he had cracked my skull open with a 2x4. I jumped so hard, it scared my poor dog who had been sleeping next to me. I am so very sorry to little Haru for needing to deal with my bullshit. There was also this similar moment when I was facing a horde in Days Gone and a freaker blindsided me. I panicked so hard, I started fumbling the controls and it very nearly got me killed. Can you see now how the stress posed by these scenarios, contextualized by the decisions made prior, can set you up for a trip to the ER due to a classic case of cardiac arrest? But if you're able to conquer these challenges, it honestly feels more rewarding than beating other games. Oh, you beat Halo 3 on Legendary? Well, have you beaten Resident Evil 2 on Hardcore in under 2 hours? Yeah, didn't think so. The genre of horror in video games really is special for all the reasons I've stated here, in my previous video, and more. And there's so much more that I would like to say about these wonderful games, but you'll once again have to wait on future videos. When they roll around, they'll probably be on specific games, like The Last of Us, Resident Evil, Fear and Hunger, and The Evil Within. If I can get it to actually fucking run. If you can't tell, these games all mean a lot to me, and replaying them for this video has only strengthened my love and appreciation for them. Like Days Gone, which I platinumed on PS4 when it first came out years ago. I even got the collector's edition. Look at how neat the statue is. But since platinuming it, I haven't touched it since. But you can add it to the list of games getting their own video too. Despite its flaws, it's actually in my top 10 favorite games ever. And I didn't even mention games where horror isn't the focus, but borrow heavily from horror tropes or have elements of horror in them, like Doom or Devil May Cry. Maybe some of you eagle-eyed viewers spotted the tattoo on my avatar's arm. This is an actual tattoo that I have and was taken from a design on Virgil's outfit. So that should clue you into how much I love that series. And yeah, add it to the list too. But that's all for me for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed and have a great Halloween.